Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Hello, Stu. How are you?
Hello, Lorraine. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I thought, Stu, we might want to have a chat about the Law Society's recent sort of tools that have come out on diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion, which, amongst many topics, including some some very wild topic names, Stu, including, let me tell you, inspiration porn. But what I think is of interest to lots of lawyers, including ourselves, of course, is the use of dear sirs,
Yeah, yeah.
inclusive greetings in correspondence. So I guess the question is, dear sirs, does it matter? And what the Law Society says, to be completely fair, is it's a gendered greeting which perpetuates the assumption that the recipients of correspondence are by default men. This is no longer accurate, representative, or appropriate in today's diverse society. And they recommend that organisations drop the use of dear sirs. And in a moment, we'll perhaps have a quick chat about some of the alternatives, Stu.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what do you think about the dear sirs?
Um, well, well, first and foremost, we completely appreciate that to some, maybe that could be offensive. However, I think the dear sirs is about professionalism, isn't it? And the way we address sort of our, opposing lawyers on the other side, it's coming across as being professional. And I'm not sure saying hi, Lorraine, as an introduction to an email, gives it the professional clout that maybe dear sirs does. So that would kind of be my view on it. But obviously, being a male. I may have a slight bias. Obviously, you being female, what's your sort of opinion?
Well, I think, Stu, to be perfectly honest, it's never offended me.
Hmm.
But then I'm of a different generation, which I think it's fair to say than obviously newer entrants to the profession, obviously. But I do think that when I first went into the legal profession, the sexism and misogyny was absolutely rife. I've been subject to, sexual harassment, sexism, and everything else. And I'm not saying that as a badge of honor. It was a terrible, grim thing at times. So if I'm honest, dear sirs being a manifestation of that is something that never occurred to me at the time, and it still doesn't, if I'm really truthful, because, well, as I say, I mean, I can't even begin to describe to you some of the things that have been suggested to me, but I was subject to some fairly significant sexual harassment from a good client of the firm many years ago, and I told the senior partner, and I was only a trainee, and it's hard for trainees to say anything, but I told the senior partner, and he slapped me on the back and said, "Don't worry, Lorraine, you've got broad shoulders." And that was it. That was how he dealt with it. So that's my context. That's
Yeah.
where I'm coming from. So I have to say my personal view is that I think the profession's got more to worry about than the use of dear sirs, if I'm really honest. And I do agree with you on the professionalism front. But Stu, let's have a look at some of the Law
I
Society.
think one of my sort of immediate thoughts on the dear sirs was to transform it to dear sirs stroke madam.
Yeah,
But of course, then we actually lead into another problem that not everybody wants to be referred to as either sir or madam.
yeah,
So it's a real difficult subject to get right, isn't it? And I know there's been sort of suggestions, to who it may concern, and things like that. But it does lead you into thinking, well, there's a complete balance, from being personal to not personal. And I think it's a difficult one. I think, if I was writing to you, I could say, "Dear Miss Richardson." There are other scenarios, but and I think this is a subject that is very opinion based, isn't it? So there's not a right or wrong answer. And of course, traditionally here, we have continued to address other firms as dear sirs, and we have had the occasional piece of backlash where a firm has wrote back. So, you can't ignore the fact that other people's opinions, are out there, and it is something maybe we do need to address to some degree, but it's finding that balance between, not losing our professionalism, I think.
I think that's the key to it, Stu. And of course, I think that us as non-contentious lawyers maybe also would come at it from a slightly different angle. If you're writing to a firm in a contentious context, a letter before action or whatever, well, you want that degree of formality. And maybe for example, to whom it may concern at that level might actually be appropriate. But the Law Society, to be fair, has suggested, dear team, dear organisation. I don't feel, dear colleagues has got quite the right feel to it.
They're not. It's an interesting now because they're not our colleagues, are they?
No. Well, I suppose in the very broad sense of being members of the profession.
Very broad.
Yeah. Dear managing partner, or dear legal team.
Yeah.
Dear HR team. I mean, greetings. Good morning or good afternoon, dear all.
I think the good morning, good after. I mean, that's what we here have kind of settled on in terms of a balance potentially. But I also do think, you could argue this with clients as well. It's interesting if a client was to sign off their name as Stuart or Stu, I kind of then would normally write back, dear Stuart or dear Stu or dear Ed or dear Edward, that kind of thing. So I kind of follow somebody's, I suppose, their lead, yeah. But I would never automatically. I wouldn't even write to a client in the first instance as dear Lorraine.
No, I think that's far too informal. And actually, because I do a lot of teaching and a lot of marking and a lot of legal skills, and frankly, dear sirs and yours faithfully in terms of letter writing has always been a sort of staple of any sort of grammar and letter writing sort of workshop or session.
Yeah.
And I will be interested to see. I don't believe that the SRA, for example, has given any guidance yet in terms of assessing the skills on the solicitor's qualification examination, for example. I suspect that they will quite clearly want to follow the Law Society's lead on this. But I think that losing that degree of formality is the thing that concerns me. It's not a sexist thing at all. It's the degree of formality. And I think, and I always say to students when they're writing, if they do a letter as a piece of work and put dear Bob, and kind regards, I will always say as an initial communication, that's probably too informal. So I think it is the issue of formality. And I do agree, professionalism and trying to find that balance and the alternative. I do think it's important that firms address it if it's a concern to them. I do think that people within the firm should be consistent. But I think what conveyancers will recognise is that, and the Law Society say, if you know the person's name, always use it. But of course, very often, teams of people in conveyancing are working on files, and you might have the name of somebody who's dealing with the pre-exchange stuff, but that might be the same person as dealing with the post-exchange stuff. So we then go back to, what do I call someone? I think good morning or good afternoon is pretty neutral.
Yeah.
But I would say to Stu, it's that sort of higher level of what do we do as an alternative if we're writing to an organisation? Say you've got to, make a complaint against a firm, or as I say, possibly, start to talk about a potential negligence claim or something. I wonder whether that formality is lost.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. It's a difficult one.
It is. And are the as far as you're aware, Stu, are the case management system providers, are they starting to address it?
Yes, is the answer to that. Yeah. So we now have an option as to how we want to address somebody in basically the examples that you've just used. So we can select a drop-down box now to determine how we address people. Yeah.
I think it's important for firms to consider the issue, and I suggest firms perhaps just try to ensure a degree of consistency across the board. I think whatever firms decide to do. I think the slightly sad thing about it is that if a firm chooses to continue to use dear sirs, which at the end of the day is the firm's prerogative, that might be interpreted, continuing to use it might be interpreted as some sort of passive aggressive, stance, when actually it probably isn't.
It's not. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there's just a balance to the whole thing, isn't there? I kind of get both sides of the argument, but I do think that, call it an age thing, a cultural thing. It does depend what era you're from, maybe, as to your thoughts on the subject matter potentially. But
Yeah, I think so, Stu. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I just think the key thing is for firms to consider it, particularly actually those higher up in firms, considering the impact on the you know the perhaps more junior members of their team, and I mean that in a very broad sense. I don't mean
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of hierarchy and qualification. I mean in terms of years and attitude, actually, and do something
Yeah,
that's
yeah. But
inclusive.
you could argue, couldn't you, the other way around, that we may have older, be it clients or colleagues, okay, that we're writing to that actually want to be addressed as Mr., as Mrs., in a certain way, perhaps. So I think there's a balance that you have to find that suits your, whether it be your client bank or your, like you say, your practice style and so on and so forth. But I think it works both ways. We certainly have younger clients that we would write to in a certain way if they address us in a certain way. Um, and of course, older clients that we would always say, dear Mr., dear Mrs., etc. And again, I think sometimes you may need to read, if your sort of opinion is fairly neutral on the matter, maybe read the correspondence that you receive as well. You know, if you're dealing with a firm that is very formal, that addresses you as dear sirs, they're clearly not that bothered. So, you know, maybe you could sort of have to make a bit of a commercial decision as you're corresponding with people as to how you address them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Stu. Well, I think the dear sirs argument might rumble on.
I
So
think so.
hopefully we've given our colleagues watching this something to think about. So thanks for that, Stu. See you soon.
Take care.